Back in 2014, an amateur kickboxer, Dennis Munson, who had been training under Roufusport, had fought in his pro debut, or he just fought in his debut fight. I don't remember if it was pro or amateur. After losing that fight, he also lost his life, and there had been an investigation that had gone into that. The local newspaper, the Milwaukee Journal-Constitution, had actually put out like a 10-minute video on it that was pretty damning if you watched it, where you could see that the referee wasn't really paying a whole lot of attention in the fight. The ringside doctor wasn't paying a whole lot of attention in the fight. Even his cornerman wasn't paying a whole lot of attention in the fight. Just to give a quick recap on what happened with that. So he came out in the first round, looked all right at the start. I mean, he was in it. It was pretty competitive. But by the end of the first round, he looked, if you didn't know better, he looked like he was gassed at the very least. Like he wasn't moving very well. He looked really tired, really slow, wasn't really punching very hard. His opponent didn't really seem to be all that aggressive about it either. That's probably the weirdest thing to me, is that after the first round, Munson, you could tell, was pretty much done out there. Now, granted, for the doctor and for his own corner, you should probably start looking to throw in the towel. Probably not at the end of the first round, but at least at the end of the second, once you see your fighter going that way. But it's surprising that the other fighter wasn't able to put him away. But that's not really the point here. Second round comes around, he's stumbling around a little more, having trouble getting off his stool. His cornerman, Scott Cushman, who has been cornering a lot of UFC fighters out of Roufusport too, doesn't really seem to pay too much attention to it. He gets out there, puts together a really bad round, just really slow, wobbling around out there, gets through it. Second round ends, referee isn't really paying a lot of attention as he stumbles to his corner. They go out again, same type of thing. Again, not a good look out of Munson, not a good look out of the doctor, who was looking at his cell phone at the time. He goes out again, finishes the round, finishes the fight, loses the fight. But he wasn't looking right, he wasn't feeling right, and afterwards he went to the hospital, and ultimately his life came to an end. So this had happened back in 2014, and just this week, his family decided to sue Roufusport over this. Now again, Roufusport, it was Duke Roufus's promotion that was putting on the fight. Again, his cornerman, Scott Cushman, was a Roufusport coach. The doctors, I believe, worked with Roufusport too. So I think everything throughout this was under the umbrella of Roufusport. And there are two things to look at here. So there's the court of public opinion, and there's obviously the actual court. If you look at the video that the Milwaukee Journal-Constitution put out, it's damning. It looks really bad. I mean, even if you don't know anything about the sport, the worst thing you could say is that his corner just let him go out there exhausted and put him at risk. But it's worse than that. The signs he was showing go a little bit beyond just physical exhaustion as far as like being gassed out. I mean, he was wobbling around, didn't really seem to know where he was just kind of like fighting off his instinct at that point. And his cornerman really should have stepped in. The doctor should have stepped in to check. The referee really wasn't paying attention. And from that standpoint, that's a very bad look. I think if you're in the Milwaukee area and you're looking to train in kickboxing, become a kickboxer, even become an MMA fighter and do some kickboxing fights in the meantime, it's definitely going to make you wary about training with Roufusport, but also even competing with them, because not everybody who competes in their promotion is actually someone who trains at Roufusport. They're not all just Roufusport versus Roufusport fights. So for that business, that's going to be a bad look anyway. And I think if you're a fan of kickboxing in the area, I don't know if you're going to want to go to one of those events either. So that could hurt the promotional business. But even aside from that, as far as the actual lawsuit goes, again, it looks really damning based on the video they have. Now, one thing you have to consider is that for a lot of these gyms, both as a member of the gym, but then also as a fighter, you're signing a lot of waivers. And without knowing the language of the waiver, it's hard to say who's legally going to be liable and whether or not the waiver is even something that's going to count. Because sometimes people will sign a waiver and then the court will decide, well, there's no reasonable way they would have known what was in it, or they would have understood that this is what they were risking. So sometimes that doesn't even count. But I know in the past, like for different tournaments I've competed in, or just even going to my gyms, obviously I have waivers to sign there. I don't exactly read through the language specifically. I understand that when I'm doing it, that, hey, if I sign a waiver and I go to this gym and I get my arm, so here's an example, like I mess up my UCL, or my ulnar collateral ligament, which is the Tommy John ligament. I've had a few injuries with that, both on my left and my right arm. Like, I understand that I'm not going to go back and sue the gym owner once that happens. Like, that's just kind of a risk that I'm taking by training there. So there are things like that that I think are pretty well assumed under the risk. So again, with Munson, if he gets knocked out or something normal under a fight happens, I don't know that the promoter is liable. This, again, depending on the full language of the waivers, I don't know what they put in their waivers. There's a chance that legally they might not be liable for this, and they might have a case, but whether or not they legally get lost, or they legally lose this lawsuit, and whether or not Munson's family gets a big payout from it, I think this really is a bad look for it, and I hope that fighters in the Midwest area are going to pay attention to this and really look not to compete under the Roufusport banner. And even if they're not even competing under the Roufusport banner, there are a lot of regional promoters who are fairly new to the business or aren't exactly all that experienced. And you want to learn from what happened to Munson so it doesn't happen to you. So even if you're cornering a fighter, whether it's in the Midwest or anywhere else, and they're looking bad on a fight, try to remember what you saw in the video with Munson and say, hey, my guy's kind of wobbling around. He's not looking good out here. It's even if it's not his debut, like, you want to live to fight another day. Like, he's not looking good. This fight, he's not making any money out of it, or he's not making much money. Like, maybe we should throw in the towel. Maybe we should kind of pull it early here, and it'll be worth it in the long haul. And I think if that's what comes of this, even if the Munson family loses the lawsuit, which they may have a very good case. Again, I'm not a legal scholar. I don't know what the waivers say. I don't know everything that's being considered in this. Obviously, from the case that the Journal-Constitution makes, it looks very bad for Roufusport. But either way, I think the MMA community has a lot to learn out of this. If one of your fighters are looking pretty bad, don't be afraid to throw in the towel. Obviously, the ringside doctors, don't be looking at your phone between rounds. Pay attention to the fighters. These are the kind of things that can really hurt the sport and hurt the growth of the sport. Yes, we're in all 50 states, but there are still some countries that won't allow MMA to be sanctioned. There are countries that aren't allowing kickboxing to be sanctioned, including Canada. And when things like this happen with Roufusport, it doesn't just hurt Dennis Munson. It doesn't just hurt Dennis Munson's family. It doesn't just hurt Dennis Munson's friends. It hurts the whole sport. So hopefully we can use this as something that we can learn off of and just kind of grow forward and not see this happen again.